With this video, we're going to be going through the entire lesson of solving rational equations. So there are a couple different ways that we can solve rational equations, and we'll go through both we'll go through two of the major ways you can do it. There are a couple other ways too, but these students find to be the most easy to actually solve these. So those are the two that we're going to go through today. But it'll be the entire lesson, and I'll give you some chance to practice a couple problems as we go along as well. So we're going to be solving some basic rational equations using proportions. These are some stuff that we've learned long ago. Then we're going to be adding a little bit more complication to them. Then we're going to be able to solve very complicated ones using the lowest common denominator. We're going to multiply each part by that lowest common denominator. All right, so this is the warm-up. I'd like you to go ahead and try all three of these problems. Push pause now after you've obtained an answer, then come on back and push play. Check your answers here. With these are our proportions. We're basically just cross-multiplying. Hopefully that should be somewhat familiar to you. And on this one here, we have to realize that 3 is the same thing as 30 over 10. That way we have them all the same denominator on the bottom. All right, so when we're solving them using the proportion, this is the way that you're used to already. This was number 1 that we did. And with this one, what we're basically doing is cross-multiplying. I'm going 3 times y gives me 3y. 5 times 6 is on the other side of the equal sign. Okay, so 30 equals 3y. Divide both sides by 3. I end up with y equals 10. Okay, this is the way that you're used to solving these. You've done these several times. Now we're going to make it a little bit more complicated, though. I'm going to add in several variables instead of just one. But we're going to use the same method. So I've got 6 times 4 gives me 6 times 4. X times x plus 2 on the other side. So 6 times 4 is 24. X, I've got to distribute this x. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. Now we've got to solve this one. There are several different methods in which we can solve this one. We could plug these into the calculator. We could use a quadratic formula. Anything that we're basically going to do with these, because this is a quadratic on this side, on the right-hand side, we want to set them equal to 0. So we've got to get rid of this 24. So I'm going to subtract 24 from both sides now. Now I get this with the 0 equals. Now it's very easy to plug into the quadratic formula. But I can see right away that I can factor these two. Two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 24, but add together to give me 2. Let's see, that would be a 6 and negative 4. So there are my factors. Now that I have my factors, I can set each portion equal to 0. X plus 6 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. Solve each one of them individually. I'll subtract 6 from both sides. I find out that x equals negative 6. Add 4 to both sides and find out that x equals 4. So I have 2 answers on this one because I ended up with a quadratic. But I ended up having to move everything onto one side, then factor it, then actually solve it. So it's a lot more complex than something that we've done previously, which is still okay. We're still using the same process. We already know how to factor. We know how to use a quadratic formula if you want to do that. We're compiling several things that we already know how to do all into one problem. All right, let's get some practice on this. I want you to go ahead and try both of these two. After you've obtained your, push pause now, after you've obtained your answer, come on back and push play. Check your answers here. Hopefully you were able to obtain the correct answer here. This one only has 1 answer. This one has 2. Number 1 was really similar to the example that we went through before. Number 2, you'll notice on this one I ended up with just x's on both sides, so it was not a quadratic. I only ended up with 1 answer here. All right, I want you to try these two. Push pause now. Go ahead and work out each of the problems, obtain your solutions, then come on back and push play. Check your answers here. All right, hopefully you've got that process down pretty well. Those aren't too bad after you get a little bit of practice with them. Now we're going to get into some that are a lot more complicated. All right, now this one, unfortunately, we don't have it set up as a proportion, so it's not an easy one. I could somehow set up a proportion if I could somehow combine these two. That is one method, not the method I'm going to go through. The method I'm going to go through right now works all the time, and it gets rid of our fractions. A lot of students don't like to have fractions. Sometimes they're a little bit more difficult to deal with. The way that we're going to do this is to obtain our lowest common denominator, then multiply all parts by that lowest common denominator. All right, so the lowest common denominator here, let's see, I've got x's and I've got a 3. So my lowest common denominator here is going to be 3x. Well, now that I know that, I'm going to multiply each section. We have 3 sections. I'm going to multiply this section here by 3x, this middle section by 3x, and this far section by 3x. Now that sounds weird. We're not changing the value because remember, on an equation, as long as you do it to both sides completely, then you haven't changed the value at all. So we're not changing the value. What we're trying to do is get rid of these fractions, and you'll start to see that as we go through these. Okay, so I'm going to multiply each section by 3x. So this was my original one, 2 over x. I still have that, 2 over x. I just multiplied it by 3x. Now, when I say multiply by 3x, it's the same thing as 3x over 1. If you want to think of it easy, then just think of multiplying just the top, the numerator, by 3x. That will work just fine. Same thing on this one. I've got 1/3. I multiplied the top by 3x. This one I've got 4 over x. Multiply the top by 3x. Notice I'm not multiplying top and bottom by 3x. Okay, that won't help me at all. It won't get rid of my fraction. All right, so now that I've got all of these set up, now what I'm going to do is start reducing these. Okay, I've got 6x, 3x, and 12x. Okay, so now you notice over here I've got an x on top and bottom. I can cross off those x's. So you're starting to see that I'm eliminating these fractions here. Here I've got a 3 on top and bottom. I can cross off those 3's. And over here I have an x on top and bottom. I can cross off those x's. Essentially what we just did is got rid of all the fractions. Now let's see what we have left with. I've got an x, or excuse me, a 6 here. I've got an x here and a 12. So let's write what we have left. 6 plus x equals 12. I've gotten rid of all my fractions. It's a very easy one-step equation. I subtract 6 from both sides. I end up with x equals 6. So the hardest part, number one, is finding the lowest common denominator. After you found that, then we multiply all of the tops, if you want to think of it that way, that's fine, by that lowest common denominator. Then start reducing. After you've multiplied all the tops by that lowest common denominator, your next step is to reduce. You should no longer have a fraction at all. That will work all the time. Okay, we want to check it. It's always got to be able to plug back in to make sure it's going to work. So we plug in 6 for each one of these here. Let's see, this would be 2 divided by 6 plus 1/3 equals 4/6. So yes, we are okay. That's fine. Because it would be 2/6, 1/3 is the same thing as 2/6. So 2/6 plus 2/6 equals 4/6. So that does work. And you will get one every once in a while that will be what we call an extraneous solution. It'll be one that you obtain an answer in which it doesn't work. So you do want to plug those back in to make sure that they will work. All right. Here are 2. I'm going to give you a chance to work through these here. Number 1 is very similar to the one that we just did. Number 2 is a little more complex. You can still do it. You just got to obtain the lowest common denominator on those. Okay, so push pause now. Go through and work out the entire problem. After you've obtained your solution, come on back and push play. Check your answers here. Okay, so hopefully you're getting the trick there. The first step here, we found out the LCD is 9x. We automatically cross off all of these top and bottom. Notice how I have no denominator. I have no fraction here. Same thing over here. This one was a little bit different. Hopefully you found out that it was 3 times x minus 4. 3 times x minus 4 is 3x minus 12. So that's why I crossed off both of those there. Okay, these are complicated again. Again, you're going to use the same process. Multiply each one of the tops, each one of the numerators, by that lowest common denominator. Now, number 2 looks scary here because we've got this huge thing here. But once you find your lowest common denominator, just keep these in parentheses. It won't be as bad as it appears right there. Go ahead and try both of these problems. After you've obtained your answers, come on back and push play. Check your answers here. Now, interesting thing on, let's talk about number 2 real quick. Number 2, you notice the 6x and 6a and 6a. We crossed both of those off. So this one really wasn't that bad. We ended up with just the same quadratic that we've got here. And in moving it to one side, we ended up eliminating that altogether, which gave us just one answer. Number 1, I do want to address something here real quick. Number 1 ended up getting 2 different answers. Some of you got to this spot right here, this x squared minus 6x equals 0, and you didn't know what to do. Now, again, several different options will work. I chose to pull out a common factor, which is x. Then I set both of these equal to 0, x equals 0, and x minus 6 equals 0. From here, though, you could have done the quadratic formula. That would have worked. That still would get you the same answers of 0 and 6. Now, when we get these two answers, again, we have to plug these back in to make sure they're going to work. 0 does not work. We cannot divide by 0. In other words, we cannot have 0 on the denominator. Well, 3 times 0 is 0, so that one will not work. So that is not our answer. We call that an extraneous solution. 6 is our answer in this case. All right, that one was quite a bit complicated. Let's look at this one. Now, this one is complicated as well. I'm going to go through this one with you. If you feel like you're ready for it, you can push pause and then come on back and see how I do it, and you can try it out on your own. But I'm going to go ahead and go through this one for you. Now, on this one, again, we're going to use the same process. We've got to obtain our lowest common denominator. What's a little bit hard to tell what our lowest common denominator is because we've got x squared minus 16. So we've got to factor that one first. The factors of x squared minus 16 are x plus 4 times x minus 4. We've got to know that. Now, if we know that, that makes it easy. That means that our lowest common denominator is x plus 4 times x minus 4. Because I've got an x minus 4 here and x plus 4 here, and this is x minus 4 times x plus 4. So our lowest common denominator is that. So I'm going to use this exact same process, and this sounds very, very complicated, but it's really not. I'm going to multiply each one of these sections here by this x plus 4 times x minus 4. And I'm going to keep it in these parentheses here just because it's going to make it a lot easier when I go to reduce. All right, so I multiply all of that on top here, and that kind of sounds a little bit complicated, but basically I'm multiplying each one of these parts by that. Let's bring in this one. Some of you may prefer to view it as this one. It's the exact same thing. All I did is multiplied each numerator by this x plus 4 times x minus 4. I had a 1 here, same thing here. I had a 1. Over here I had a 24, and I got this x plus 4 times x minus 4. Now here I went ahead and I factored this x squared minus 16, just to make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing here. Okay, let's start over here. Looks like I've got an x minus 4 on top and bottom, so I can cross both of those two off. Over here, I've got an x plus 4 on top and bottom. I can cross both of those off. Remember that we can cross these off as long as we're crossing off the entire quantity. And finally, over here, I've got, let's see, I've got an x plus 4 on top and bottom, that's for sure. And I also have an x minus 4 on top and bottom, so I cross those off. That eliminates my fractions. I don't have any more fractions. I just had to kind of look here and see what I've got left. It looks like I've got a 1 times x plus 4, which is just x plus 4. You'll see that here. I've got a 1 times x minus 4, which is just x minus 4, equals 22. Now I'm going to solve this one. All right, I've got common factors here, common pieces that I can combine here. I've got x's. My x's can be combined. I've got 1x there and 1x there, and my 4's can be combined. I always do a squiggle underneath the ones that I can combine. It helps me. So that gives me 2x plus 0. 4 minus 4 is just 0. So 2x equals 22. X equals 11. So then we need to plug these back in and make sure that they're going to work. Okay, you're going to do that each time just for the sake of the video. In order to shorten it, I'm not going to plug those back in. I do know that these do work. But you always want to just plug them back in. You can plug them into your calculator. 1 over 11 minus 4 plus 1 over 11 plus 4 equals. And just make sure it equals that and you'll be fine. All right, let's give you some practice on this. So you're going to do something very similar to what we just did on the previous one. You obtain your lowest common denominator first, then multiply top and bottom, or excuse me, just the top by that. Push pause now, work through the entire problem after you've obtained your solution. Come on back and push play. Check your answer here. Your answer should have been negative 7. Negative 7. K equals negative 7. Hopefully you're getting the process there. Again, we're multiplying just the numerator, what's on top, by that k plus 5 times k minus 2. And everything, basically, all the denominators, all the bottoms get crossed off here. Okay, this one is a really complicated one, only because it's something a little bit different than what you've seen. Okay, this one, I don't really have this one on your homework nor the test, but it's a good one if you really think that you're getting this one. You can try this problem. Okay, I'm going to kind of run through it fairly quickly. If you don't want to try this one and you just want to stop now, that's fine. All right, so on this one, our lowest common denominator, the first thing we have to do is factor this y squared plus y minus 12. That factors to y plus 4 times y minus 3. I've got a y minus 3 here, so my least common denominator is y plus 4 times y minus 3. So I'm going to do the same process. I'm going to multiply all the numerators, all the tops, by that portion here. Okay, let's bring this in. Notice on this one here, I only have this. This is all on top because this is all over 1. Okay, now I've got a y minus 3 on top and bottom. I can cross those off. Over here I have a y plus 4 on top and bottom I can cross off, and a y minus 3 top and bottom I can cross off. Now what I'm left with here is a negative 4 times y plus 4. I've got a y plus 4 times y minus 3 equals negative 10. That's all I was left with on this side of the equal sign, is just a negative 10. So I'm going to have to distribute this 4 to everything inside here, as well as multiply these two. And you can use a FOIL method or the box method. Any of those work just fine. After I FOIL those two, I end up with a y squared plus y minus 12. Over here, I have to distribute that 4 to everything inside. That's negative 4y minus 16. Nothing else I changed, okay? I didn't change anything else. I just left it alone. Now that I've got this, I have to combine like terms. I've got a negative 4y here plus y. I've got a negative 16 minus 12. I'll combine those two, negative 4y and y. Now I end up with a quadratic equation here. I need to move my 10 over to the other side. Add 10 to both sides. That gives me this quadratic. I have to factor this one, or I can plug it in the quadratic formula. Either one works. Factoring is a little bit quicker on this one. Two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 18, but add together to give me negative 3 would be positive 6 and negative 3. So y minus 6 times y plus 3. Now I set each one of these equal to 0. Y minus 6 equals 0, and y plus 3 equals 0. I find out that y equals 6 and y equals negative 3. All right, that will conclude this video. These are fairly complex. You're going to need a lot of practice on these. The big thing is, number one, to find your lowest common denominator, then multiply each part, the numerator on each part, by that lowest common denominator. Then that will eliminate your fraction. Then just solve it like a normal equation.